The box was already open by the time Lenora understood what was happening. Lenora Voss, 37 years old, senior partner at Voss Meridian Capital. Though no one at the Hartwell Gallery fundraiser that evening knew that last part, stood near the window with a glass of Riesling she hadn't touched, watching her husband of 9 years cross the marble floor toward her with a black velvet box in his outstretched hand and a smile she no longer trusted. The room was full, 200 guests, maybe more. Vancouver's arts community, the old money crowd from West Vancouver, a scattering of city councillors. Everyone dressed beautifully, everyone watching. Happy anniversary, Preston said, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. He said it the way men say things when they want an audience. The box held a bracelet, white gold she assumed, or something made to look like it. A cluster of stones that caught the chandelier light and threw it back in every direction. It was the kind of piece that looked expensive until you looked at it longer. Lenora had spent 20 years around enough jewelry to know the difference. Though she said nothing, she smiled. She closed the box gently. She thanked him, and from across the room Preston's father, Graham Aldrich Voss, 64 years old, the man who had never once called her by her first name in 9 years of Sunday dinners and Christmas mornings, raised his glass and began to speak. "My son," Graham said, "has always known how to value the right things." There was gentle laughter. There were toasts. Lenora set her Riesling down on the windowsill and thought about the call she'd taken that morning from the board of Meridian North. It had started the way these things always start, not with a single betrayal, but with a slow accumulation of small ones, each one easy enough to explain away on its own. Preston Aldrich Voss was 39 years old when Lenora married him. He was handsome in the particular way of men who grew up being told they were exceptional. Square jaw, easy confidence, the kind of laugh that filled whatever room he was in. He worked in commercial real estate development. He was good at it, or had been. He knew how to talk to people. He knew how to make a room feel like it was waiting for him. What he did not know in those early years was that the woman he married had spent the previous decade quietly building one of the most significant private investment portfolios in Western Canada. It wasn't deception, exactly. Lenora had simply learned, long before Preston, that the less people knew about what you had, the more clearly you could see who they actually were. Her mother had taught her that. Evelyn Voss née Hargreave, who had built a regional textile business out of a rented storefront in Saskatoon and sold it at 61 for a number that made national business press, had told her daughter on the occasion of Lenora's first real success, "Keep the quiet. People show you everything when they think you have nothing." So Lenora had kept the quiet. She had structured her holdings under Meridian Capital, a name deliberately chosen for its vagueness. She had kept her profile low. She sat on 2 boards under her maiden name, Hargreave, which Preston had never connected to her because he had never thought to look. She attended industry events when she had to and avoided them when she didn't. Her assistant Claudette, only Claudette, knew the full picture. Preston knew she had some investments. He knew she was comfortable. He had once, early in their marriage, asked to look at her financial statements, framing it as an interest in shared planning. She had declined, quietly, but without apology, and he had not asked again. For years, it was fine. Not perfect, she had noticed things, filed them away, decided she was being uncharitable. Preston cancelled dinners. Preston came home late and showered immediately. Preston had opinions about where she spent her time and with whom, opinions he delivered as concern rather than control. But every marriage had friction. Every marriage had difficult seasons. The first season that felt genuinely wrong was the winter 2 years ago, when she found a hotel receipt in the pocket of his jacket while sending it to the cleaner, the Sutton place. A Tuesday, he had told her he'd been in Kelowna for a site visit. She had put the receipt back. She had sent the jacket. She had said nothing. She had instead started paying attention. By the spring of last year, she had a folder. Not because she was building a case, or not only that, because Lenora Voss was a woman who had always understood that information was the thing that protected you, and that the time to gather it was before you needed it, not after. The folder contained 2 additional hotel receipts, both downtown Vancouver, both on days Preston had given her alternative explanations for his absence. A phone bill showing a number called with a frequency that did not match professional necessity. Photographs, taken by a private investigator she had retained through a third party, photographs of Preston and a woman named Darcis Fontaine, 31, junior associate at a development firm Preston had been courting as a partner. There were also more quietly financial documents. Preston had been moving money, not from their joint account, which held enough for household expenses and nothing significant. Lenora had always kept it that way, but from his own business accounts. The development firm was overextended. 2 projects had gone sideways. He had investors asking questions he didn't have good answers for. She had a contact at the business registry office. She had a very good accountant. She understood the situation better than Preston imagined she did. She understood it the evening she sat in her study after everyone was asleep, the city lights spread across the harbour, and read through what her accountant had sent. Preston's firm was carrying debt against assets that didn't exist yet. He needed a capital injection within the quarter, or he would lose the Burrard Street project, which was the project his father had spent the last year telling every person he met was going to be the thing that finally proved Preston's name meant something. The Burrard Street project. Lenora set down the folder. She picked up her tea. She thought about Graham Voss at every family dinner for 9 years, talking about legacy, talking about what the Voss name meant in this city, talking, more than once, with the particular pleasure of a man performing for an audience, about the investment group that had just committed significant capital to a new mixed-use development in False Creek. A group called Meridian North, a visionary outfit, Graham had said. Smart money, the kind of people Preston should be getting in front of. Lenora had smiled into her wineglass each time. Meridian North was hers, had been hers for 4 years. The False Creek commitment Graham was so impressed by. She had approved it herself in a boardroom meeting on a Wednesday morning, 6 months before Graham had ever heard the name. She had said nothing. She had refilled Graham's glass and asked him if he wanted more of the roast. The anniversary fundraiser had been Preston's idea. Ostensibly a charitable occasion, the Hartwell Gallery's Emerging Artists Fund, which was a genuine cause and one Lenora actually cared about. But Preston had pushed hard for them to attend together, publicly, visibly. She understood why. His investors would be there. His father would be there. He needed to look stable. He needed to look like a man whose life was in order. She had agreed to attend. She had also, 3 days earlier, received a call from the chair of the Hartwell Foundation's investment committee, who was a careful and precise woman named Rosalind Okafor. Rosalind had called to confirm that Lenora, under her Hargreave name, as a named donor and board observer, would be in attendance, and to let her know that the foundation was planning a small acknowledgement of the Meridian North Partnership during the evening's program. Lenora had thanked Rosalind. She had told her that would be fine. She had not mentioned it to Preston. The bracelet moment happened at 8:45. Preston had timed it, she realized later. He had waited until the room was at its fullest, until the noise had reached that particular pitch where people are loosened by wine and music and the pleasure of being seen somewhere good. Then he had walked across to her with the box and the smile and the loud enough voice. The bracelet was from a boutique on Robson Street. She knew the boutique. She had walked past it. The stones were cubic zirconia, not lab diamond, not moissanite, which at least would have indicated some thought. Cubic zirconia, set in sterling silver with a rhodium plate that would oxidize within a year. The box it came in was nicer than the bracelet. She thanked him. She smiled. She set it on the table beside her Riesling, and then she excused herself to find Rosalind Okafor, who was standing near the back bar looking exactly like a woman who had been waiting. "Ready?" Rosalind said. "Whenever you are," Lenora said. At 9:15, the program director asked for the room's attention. There were remarks about the foundation's work. The artists supported, the year ahead. There was applause. And then Rosalind stepped to the microphone and spoke about Meridian North's commitment to arts infrastructure in the city, a 7-figure gift, the largest in the foundation's history, and expressed the foundation's deep gratitude to Meridian's principal. "We're honored," Rosalind said, "to have Lenora Hargreave Voss was tonight." The room turned. Preston turned. Graham Voss, standing near the bar with a scotch in his hand and his chin lifted in the way it always was when he was performing Pride, turned and then did not move for a long time. Lenora walked to the microphone. She thanked the foundation. She said a few words about why arts funding mattered, about what it meant to support emerging work in a city that was making it harder every year to live as an artist. She was brief. She was precise. She did not look at Preston. She looked at Rosalind, and at the program director, and at the artists seated at the front tables, some of whom were visibly stunned by the number that had just been said aloud. When she stepped back from the microphone, the applause was genuine. Preston found her 20 minutes later, near the coat check. She had just finished a conversation with 2 of the foundation's board members and was retrieving her jacket. The evening was winding. She was ready to leave. "Lenora." His voice was low. It had that particular quality, the one she had learned to recognize over 9 years, where he was deciding in real time how to handle something. "I'd like to go home," she said. "We need to talk about. We can talk tomorrow. Or not at all. But not here, and not now." He looked at her the way he had looked at her 1,000 times when she declined to engage on his terms, a kind of frustrated bafflement, as if her calmness was a wall he couldn't find the edge of. "My father is standing over there," he said, "trying to understand. Your father has been telling everyone he knows about Meridian North for 2 years, Lenora said pleasantly. He's going to be fine. She put on her jacket. She said goodnight to the coat check attendant, by name, and she walked out into the cool Vancouver evening alone, the October air off the water hitting her face, her heels quiet on the pavement. She had told her sister about the bracelet the next morning over the phone. Her sister Bridget Hargreave Chew, 42, a family law mediator in Calgary who had expressed reservations about Preston at the engagement dinner 9 years ago and had been diplomatic enough to say so only once, listened to the whole account without interrupting. When Lenora finished, there was a pause. The Stones, Bridget said. Zirconia, another pause. He stood in a room full of your money, Bridget said, and gave you a fake bracelet. He doesn't know it's my money. He does now. Lenora looked out the window at the harbour. The morning was grey, the water pewter-coloured, a container ship moving slowly toward the inlet. Yes, she said. He does now. She had known about Darcy Fontaine for 8 months. She had said nothing because there had been no occasion that required her to say anything. She was not a woman who performed her hand early, but she had spent those 8 months making certain that when the time came, everything would be in order. Her lawyer, not the firm Preston knew about, but her own, retained under Hargreave 3 years ago, had the document file ready. The separation agreement was structured carefully. The marital assets were modest because Lenora had always been careful about what constituted marital assets. The house in West Vancouver was hers outright, purchased before the marriage with money that predated Preston entirely, which her lawyer had documented thoroughly. Preston's firm would need to refinance or fold. She had no obligation to assist with either. What are you going to do? Bridget asked. I'm going to finish my coffee, Lenora said, and then I'm going to call my lawyer. That's it? That's enough. Preston came home that afternoon. She was at her desk in the study when she heard the door. She did not get up. He appeared in the doorway. He had the look of a man who had rehearsed something which she recognized by the way he paused before speaking, as if waiting for his cue. I want to explain, he said. You don't have to. Lenora, Preston, she turned to face him. She kept her voice the same temperature it had always been with him, which was the temperature of a clear day. Not warm, not cold, simply clear. I'm not angry. I want you to know that. I'm not going to make this into something dramatic. What I am is finished. He stared at her. The bracelet was a symbol, she continued. Not of what you thought of me. Of what you thought I was worth knowing. And I think that tells me everything I needed to know about the last 9 years. The bracelet had nothing to do with. It had everything to do with it. You stood in a room full of people you were trying to impress, handed me something you bought in 40 minutes on a Thursday afternoon, and thought that was appropriate. Not because you're cruel, because you genuinely don't see me, and that's not something that gets fixed. He opened his mouth. He closed it. I've spoken to my lawyer, she said. You'll hear from her this week. The house is mine. All the documentation is there. Your things can go into storage while you arrange where you'd like to be. This is Lenora. I know what you saw last night was a surprise, but if you had just told me, if you had let me. What? Know about Meridian North? Know about the board positions? Know that I've been running a capital management firm for 10 years? She tilted her head slightly. Why would I have told you? So you could feel better about what you were doing to me. The question sat in the air between them. He did not have an answer. She had known he wouldn't. She had known the shape of this conversation for months, had understood that the only version of it that would be honest was the one where she did not pretend the problem was information. The problem was never information. You need to leave now, she said. Take what you need for a few days. The rest we'll handle through our lawyers like adults. Graham called that evening. She almost didn't answer, but then decided, because she was above all things, a woman who finished what she started, that she would. Lenora, he said. His voice had a quality she hadn't heard in it before, something quieter than his usual register. Graham, I want to say, a pause, I didn't know. About Meridian, about any of it. I know you didn't. Another pause longer. I've been saying things. At dinners. About that investment group. Not knowing you were. I know, she said, not unkindly. It's all right. It wasn't all right, not entirely. 9 years of Graham treating her like furniture, like the pleasant backdrop to his son's life, like a woman whose only relevant quality was her attachment to Preston, that wasn't resolved by one phone call. She knew that. Graham probably knew it too, in the way people know things they'd prefer not to examine. But she was not built for grudges. They were expensive. They took up space she preferred to use for other things. I was proud of the wrong things, Graham said, for a long time. Yes, she said. You were. She let that sit. She didn't soften it. I hope you'll be well, she said finally. I genuinely do. She meant it. She hung up. The separation was quiet. It was handled by lawyers, as she had said it would be. Preston did not contest the house. He did not contest much of anything, which she thought was either pride or the advice of his own counsel, and she didn't particularly care which. Darcy Fontaine, she heard through Bridget, who heard through a mutual contact, had ended things with Preston shortly the gala evening. This did not surprise her. It is one thing to pursue a man you believe to be ascending. It is another to reorient entirely around one who isn't. The Burrard Street project was refinanced by a different group. She had nothing to do with that. She had genuinely nothing to do with it, though she was aware of it because that is the nature of the industry she'd worked in for 2 decades. You are aware of things without intending to be. She bought a shorter espresso machine for the study. She had always wanted a shorter one, and Preston had bought the large Italian one that dominated the counter, and she had never said anything. She bought a smaller one, matte black, which fit under the cabinet and made excellent coffee. She had dinner with Bridget in November when Bridget came out for a conference. They sat at a small restaurant in Gastown that Lenora had been meaning to try for years, and they ate oysters and talked about their mother, about Bridget's kids, about a trip they kept saying they would take and never did. At some point, Bridget asked how she was doing. Really doing? Lenora thought about it honestly. "I'm sleeping well," she said. "For the first time in probably 3 years, I'm sleeping well." Bridget reached across the table and put her hand over Lenora's. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The bracelet she left on the counter of the Robson Street boutique, along with a brief note asking that the stones, which she acknowledged were not real, but which were nonetheless taking up space in her life, be disposed of responsibly. The boutique owner, a small woman in her 60s with paint-stained fingers who turned out to also be one of the artists the Hartwell Foundation had supported 3 years earlier, looked at the box and looked at Lenora and then back at the box. "Do you want anything for it?" she asked. "No," Lenora said. "I just don't want it back." The woman nodded, as if this made perfect sense, which it did. Lenora walked out into the November afternoon, the street bright with the particular low-angle light that comes off the mountains in the weeks before the rain sets in for good. She turned up her collar against the wind. She had a board call at 3 and dinner with a colleague at 6 and a book on her nightstand. She'd been meaning to finish for 2 months. She walked toward her car, her steps steady, her hands in her pockets, thinking about none of it and all of it at once. The way you do when you have finally set down something very heavy and your arms remember the weight, and the rest of you is already, quietly, learning what it feels like to be free.